Hello, hello. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the March Blazor Community Standup. Today, we're going to be talking about Blazor Hybrid. So this is essentially being able to use native apps across Android, iOS, Windows, Mac, and so much more. So let me just introduce myself. My name is Tanay. I work on the Blazor team. We also have with us John, who will be our wonderful co-host. Hi, John.
Hello.
We have James. Hi, James. Daniel and Elon.
Hello, world.
Hey, folks.
A cast of thousands.
I know. I forgot how to unmute my mic. I was like, what am I doing?
Okay, cool. So before we get into Blazor Hybrid, talking more about what it is, how to use it, and a lot of the wonderful features that we're working on, let's start off with the community links. So let me just share my screen here. You should be able to see it now. And these are just links, as the name suggests, from across the Blazor community that showcase a bunch of stuff that people are doing with Blazor and that you may be able to leverage using Blazor tools as well. So let's start off with the first link here. This is a tool called Blazor AI, and essentially it visualizes genetic algorithms within Blazor, using Blazor, sorry. So you can look through the screenshots and so on. It shows you, say, for example, the traveling salesman problem or the 5 houses problem and so on and so forth. Rather than going through the screenshots, let's actually just look at the demo. So here we choose a problem. So I've chosen traveling salesman. This is essentially you're given a bunch of points and you're trying to figure out what the shortest distance is going through all the points. So that's a rough summary at least. So here you can select the number of generations you want to do for your genetic algorithm, as well as the population, the selection style, and all that kind of stuff. And if you actually run the algorithm, it's going to look through the points and give you a really neat visualization.
Fancy visualizations.
Whoa.
Yeah, you can even regenerate the points, so that it's not like this is just stored data for a certain number of points or anything like that. But it's going to run through the algorithm and figure out the optimal route this way. So yeah, this
presumably for stuff like this would be great for ahead of time compilation, because it's running genetic algorithms, presumably a bit compute heavy in terms of what you're doing. So if this is, I don't know if this is Blazor WebAssembly or a Blazor server. But for any CPU intensive stuff, that's what ahead of time compilation was for. So I don't know. Maybe that's have to take a look to see if it's using that.
Yep, definitely. So definitely feel free to check it out. This is on GitHub. It's a great resource. Next thing here is a presentation on YouTube done at NDC conference by Eagle, who's the creator of the B unit framework across, along with a bunch of other stuff. Here he talks about best practices for unit testing using for Blazor components and so on. So, of course, you can write your code, but if it's not tested, how do you know if it actually works? So this provides a bunch of really great recommendations and tooling and so on and so forth that can allow you to go deeper in that area. Cool. The next two links are kind of related. They're both podcasts by Hassan. We have the one and only Steve Sanderson, as well as Daniel Roth.
I know
just
that
talking
guy.
to a bunch, talking about.
I don't know why anyone would want to watch that. That's it.
Yeah, the first one definitely. The second one, I don't know.
They're both very great. So definitely, if you want to learn more about these people, the industry, and so on, as well as Blazor itself, the roadmap, and so on and so forth, check out these podcasts, and they provide a great overview of that.
And people who don't know who Hassan is, Hassan's an engineering manager here at Microsoft, and he's done a number of Blazor-based projects for various Microsoft internal applications. Our insider trading compliance application was built using Blazor by one of his teams. So he knows the practical side of Blazor, so he's great to talk to about those types of topics.
And he also works really close with the OData team, and I'm actually having him on .net, which is on the .net YouTube, so you can subscribe over there. But he's going to be talking about some new features of OData. This one called Compute, which is kind of crazy. Like basically in the URL, you can like tell it to compute math on the REST API, like in real time. So imagine converting Celsius to Fahrenheit, but just doing it via the REST. It's bananas. So anyways, it's cool. So yeah, and there's a bunch of OData.
With OData, a URI is all you need. You can write your whole program in like one URI.
Pretty much. I don't know. The demo Hassan did on OData, I'm sure whenever it goes out, John will add it to the community links, because it's been a while since I used OData, and it like blew my mind because like it works so seamless with ASP.NET Core. It was really impressive. So
it's pretty impressive.
He was on a stand-up at some point, right, John? Recently?
Yeah. I mean, we've been doing this for like 6 years now. We've had everybody on here, but yeah, he's been
like it all blurs together.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. Let's wrap up the links here. Just a couple more here. This is just a post I saw on Twitter. This person here has created just a meme generator using Blazor and using the file system APIs. So along with being able to create memes, you can also look at how to work with the Blazor file system and so on. So yeah, this is also on
right? Like
GitHub, I believe.
Those are just the browser's new standard APIs for interacting with the file system, right? Like you get like a little file system world, I think is the way they work. And
yeah, it was something along those lines. I was looking at the code last week, I believe. Seemed like some pretty interesting stuff. So, yep. Feel free to check that out. And lastly, we have here a project by David Pine, who's created some Blazor C# source generators. So I also have a link to just introducing Roslyn source generators more generally, but a rough summary of things here is you're able to, while the C# code itself is being compiled, you can look at the compilation object and add additional C# generated files to the compilation. So here with this project, it's done with Blazor in mind. So adding various Blazor functionality using source generators. So for example, if you want to integrate with the browser local storage object, they're using source generators for that, and so on. So a bunch of really...
Yeah, so he's wrapping a bunch of JavaScript interop stuff. But what's neat with it is like you can just, using attributes on the classes, you can just say like works with storage or whatever, and then it just automatically does all the, like generates all that code for you. So pretty slick.
Yep, it's really nice. Yep. Okay, cool. That basically wraps up the community links for today.
I did look when that Blazor.ai, I did look at his WebAssembly. It doesn't look like it's doing AOT compilation. So
maybe they decided they didn't need it. I mean, I'm not as familiar with the compute requirements for genetic algorithms, but I would have thought that would be helpful. I mean, certainly if you're going to like train like a machine learned model or do a bunch of crunching in the browser, the IL interpreter that we use in Blazor WebAssembly is not going to be the fastest thing in the world. It'll drag a little bit, and that's what AOT is really for. So maybe you would benefit from that.
How would you? I mean, I know how you can see if it's using Blazor and stuff like that, and WebAssembly, but how would you know if it's using the AOT? In the browser, can you determine that?
Yeah, the easiest way to determine it is to look at the size of the WebAssembly bundle that it's downloading, the .net.wasm file. Because when you ahead of time compile the app, you're taking all the .net code and you're turning it into WebAssembly and linking it into that WebAssembly bundle. So it gets bigger. If you're seeing a large .net.wasm, then you know it was AOT. That's the easiest way to tell.
Somewhere here. Okay, cool. We can check that out later.
Yeah.
Okay.
I just like to go off topic today. Sorry.
No worries at all. I was just looking for the .net.wasm file. I wasn't seeing it here, so.
Oh, it probably. So I mean, it gets cached. Like we do lots of tricks to try and keep the app download size small. So if you've loaded before, you actually need to go into like the app settings in the browser dev tools and clear all the local storage and then refresh again so that all the files can show up in the network trace.
Okay, that makes sense. Cool. Okay, let's. I think that basically was it for the community links, at least for today. So let's actually get into the presentation and start talking about Blazor Hybrid and a bunch of wonderful stuff we can do there. So, Dan, do you want to kick that off?
I will take it over. Yeah, great. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Today, we're going to be talking all about building native client apps using Blazor, using this model that we call Blazor Hybrid. Now Blazor was originally built for the web, right? Like Blazor filled this deep aching hole in a .NET dev's heart, which is like I can build my backend services, my server rendered logic, my HTTP APIs, all that stuff. I can build it with .NET and it runs fast, and I've got a powerful platform to work with. But when I'm building a web app, if I wanted to do anything in the browser, the only thing I could use historically was JavaScript. Blazor filled that hole and gave you a way to write full stack web apps using just .NET and C# instead of having to write JavaScript. And we provide these two different hosting models to enable that scenario. One we call Blazor Server. And in this model, your components actually, they're not running in the browser. They're still running server side, but they handle all the UI interactions over a real-time connection with the browser, usually a WebSocket with the browser. So all the UI events get sent to the server, the components figure out what to do really, really fast, and then render, and Blazor cleverly figures out what needs to be updated in the DOM and sends that back down to the browser. The other way, of course, is Blazor WebAssembly, where you're running your components directly in the browser on top of a WebAssembly-based .NET runtime. This is actually one of the really cool things about the way Blazor works and is implemented. The component model allows the components to be rendered in a really flexible way. They don't have to be even in the same process where the actual DOM lives. They can be hosted in some other process and act remotely on the browser. So that's pretty cool. And what we're doing with Blazor Hybrid is we're now extending Blazor beyond the web. Instead of just being able to write web apps with Blazor, we want you to be able to use Blazor to also be able to build native client apps. Now, why would you want to do that? Like the web is this wonderful, standardized, open space, and that is true. But the web also has constraints and restrictions. You only can do as much as the web platform will allow you to do. If you need full unfettered access to the native capabilities of the device, then typically that means, well, you're going to need to write a native application. You need full native access to the underlying platform and the underlying device's native capabilities. And in some cases, the web just doesn't cut. It doesn't have enough web APIs to fill the scenarios that you need to satisfy.
Well, I think too, Dan, right, is like you also, there's many different sort of reasons why you might want to create a native application, right? So I come from a native app platform background, building apps for 10 plus years with .NET and Xamarin, .NET MAUI now. And, not only do you need those device capabilities, but you also want access to some of the really unique different capabilities that those underlying platforms are handling and doing, not only like push notifications, but doing machine learning, like access to the raw underlying power of those devices, right? And the other thing is also distribution and in-app purchases and an ecosystem too. You want to be part of that ecosystem, right? The web is a wonderful place. And yes, progressive web apps are also awesome at the same time, because it's another place that your users can go. And actually on Android, you can actually put a PWA, and Windows, you can put a PWA in the App Store. iOS is a little bit more restrictive there. And that's a great first step. But again, PWAs are great until you reach some sort of threshold, right? Where you hit this wall and you can't go any further because you're like, I need to get access to that thing. And now I can't do it. Okay, now do I integrate into some other platform? Do I rewrite my application here and there? And there's many different platforms out there. And obviously, like Xamarin and .NET MAUI were all about native UI, native APIs. But it was always harder to blend in web UI. And I think as we're building more web apps, there's a lot of customers, a lot of developers out there, and a lot of businesses that want to bring their web presence and their web skills to mobile and desktop, but not be restrictive, right? I think this big question mark that you have here is there's many reasons why you would want to do this in general. And every single developer, every single customer, every single app is a different scenario. And I think with .NET, what we want to do, and the team and everyone here, is we want to give you the flexibility to build and choose, right, exactly what you need instead of being restricted in some way.
Yeah, the thing I that's really compelling often about native development is like you have a particular platform, whether it's Microsoft's ecosystem, Android, Apple's ecosystem. Those platforms might have like a particular widget or a particular API that's unique to that platform and is not even exposed through the web. And you want to be able to use it. And the native app development enables you to do that. That can be a bit intimidating, though, if you're like me, coming from more of a web development background. Diving into native client development can be a new world. James comes from that background, so that's why we're here. We're here together. We're tag teaming on this. High five, James. On like how do we make
Alon's the glue, because he's the one that
Alon's
did the hard work.
Alon and Tanay as well. How can we give you the best of both worlds, the best of the web and the best of native client development? Well, one approach that you can use to get the best of both of those worlds is what we call hybrid apps. In a hybrid application, what you're doing is you're taking a mixture of a native client app and implementing it using web-based technologies, like using HTML and CSS for the UI. In some cases, using like JavaScript for the logic. Often the web UI gets rendered to like an embedded web view control. This model allows you to take your web development skills and your web development code and assets potentially, and reuse them when doing native client development. And there are lots of apps that use this pattern. If you've ever used Visual Studio Code, Visual Studio Code is based on Electron, which is a framework for building hybrid apps. Electron is basically a native desktop wrapper around a browser, around the Chromium browser rendering engine. And that allows you to use web skills to build cross-platform desktop apps. Now, we're .NET devs, so we don't want to be writing JavaScript. We'd like to be able to write C#. And so that's what we're looking at here with Blazor Hybrid and Blazor applications using this particular model. Now, this model does have a bunch of benefits. So you can reuse skills, you can reuse code. You still, though, get access to all the native capabilities of the device. Even though you're using like a browser control or a Chromium browser shell in order to render your UI, your code is still running natively on the machine. So if you want to touch that, special API that's only available on Android or on Windows or on iOS or whatever, you absolutely can do that because you're not running within the browser security sandbox. You're running natively on the device. You have access to anything that you want. But you can still then mix native capabilities with your web assets. Like if you do want to have some native UI in your application, you can absolutely do that. And you can put that side by side with like an embedded web view control or your browser control. Electron, I think, doesn't have as much of that, but other platforms absolutely do. So they'll have a mixture of technologies. And that's certainly a scenario that we want to enable with .NET. And in general, this can just reduce app development time. Like maybe you already have a dev team that's building your web presence, web applications, and now you need a native client application. You can reuse those dev resources in order to be able to do that. You can reuse not only their know-how, but also any code and assets that they have in that native client app. All right. So then how would we do this with .NET and Blazor? Well, it looks like this. In your native client app, we have the capability to run .NET code in native client apps. We've had Xamarin for many, many years. We have WPF and WinForms, WinUI for running .NET code on desktop machines. So we have the ability to run .NET code directly on the device, and we just take that capability and use it to run Blazor. We run your Blazor components and then render those Blazor components to an embedded web view control. So these components are still doing web UI. They're still rendering HTML and using CSS because they're running to a web view. But instead of running in the browser or instead of running remotely on a server, they're now running directly on the client device outside the browser's context and within the context of a native client application. This means your Blazor code is going to run fast. It's going to have complete access to the underlying device capabilities through normal .NET APIs. You just use the .NET platform to access file system, network, registry, whatever, because you're just running on a native .NET runtime. And you get to use your .NET skills, your C# skills, .NET libraries, and even existing Blazor components within these applications. They can then run cross-platform on desktop or mobile, wherever that native client app is set up to run. Now we have lots, like I've said, we have lots of options in .NET for building native client apps for desktop or mobile, but the one I'm really excited about is .NET MAUI. .NET MAUI is the future of cross-platform UI for .NET. It's a way for you to build a single project, a single app that can run mobile and desktop. It can run on Windows, Mac, iOS, and Android. In the future, we'll target other platforms as well. I can already hear the Linux people jumping up and down saying, "What about Linux? We want to do Linux as well. We want to do every platform, honestly, that you want to render UI on." That's the goal of MAUI. But for the initial release, it's those 4 platforms. But MAUI gives you a way to build cross-platform native UI from a single code base, mobile, desktop, and it's shipping in just a couple months, like in the middle of this year is the plan, is when the first MAUI release will come out. And what's really neat is we are integrating Blazor support into MAUI so that you can use MAUI for building Blazor hybrid applications. We're giving you a built-in MAUI control called a Blazor web view that allows you to host your Blazor components directly in a MAUI application and render them to an appropriate web view control for that underlying platform. This allows you to take your existing Blazor components from your web apps, like your Blazor server app, your Blazor WebAssembly app, Blazor component libraries from vendors or the open source ecosystem, and just reuse them in the MAUI app for the UI. Those components then can do whatever they want within the constraints of the underlying platform to access native functionality and light up those really cool and great scenarios.
Yeah, and I think, there's important parts that I want to make because there's some good questions in the chat too that I want to focus on. So Andy was asking, is it desktop only? And the answer is no, right? There's actually, with Blazor Hybrid, there's only .NET MAUI support. There's actually support for WPF and WinForms. So .NET MAUI support adds in that iOS, Android, and Mac support. So beyond Windows that you can go to actually host it. And the other thing too, like Yum Yum was asking in the chat, like, is this more just like a React Native competitor? And there's a few things I want to comment there, because there's tons of cross-platform frameworks, and choose your flavor, whatever works best for you. So I think a few different things. There's Yum was also asking about documentation, experience of devs. Here's the thing with this setup. It's a little bit different. Like with React and React Native, you actually have to create React Native components and React components. You actually have to kind of like specify those for the different platforms with different component models. Here, we actually give you the ability directly to 100% reuse the exact same component from your Blazor web app with the Blazor Hybrid application. So it's the exact same code, 100%, that can be shared. Those components. You're not creating a separate a Blazor Hybrid component there. You could, if you needed to spice a few things up for different platforms, but as far as those core components are exactly the same across the board. And additionally, right, since it's just .NET, you have 25 plus years of .NET experience from the community to build and leverage that code and the ecosystem on NuGet around it, right? Just like the vast JavaScript ecosystem, which you can also reuse in this scenario, right? So, and then we put up the .NET, I guess 20 years, sorry. 25 years of Visual Studio, 20 years of .NET. Good point. So I think that's one thing. And the other point that I really want to make here is Dan showed that slide, which was here's Blazor Server and here's Blazor Hybrid. And Alon, I steal his code slide because he has one that's basically like, it's not either of those because it's the best of both of them. Because with .NET 6 and Xamarin and .NET MAUI, .NET is running natively on the device, right? It's not running in Blazor WASM. It's not running on server. It's running on this super highly optimized .NET runtime that's running on the device. And that's a super important fact. Like, you don't need a server. You don't need WASM. You don't need any of that stuff. It's a third option out there, right? So this ability there, it kind of gives you that beautiful ability to do that. And again, it's mix and match. So what we're going to show you today is not only that you can use 100% Blazor. Like if you're just like, hey, I'm just a web developer, I only want to write Blazor, HTML, components, and not write JavaScript at all. Like, awesome, right? Not writing JavaScript is one advantage of Blazor, but the component model and the binding system and the whole bunch of interoperability, Dan sold me on it, although I'm not a web developer, so I write very minimal Blazor. But, I think that's the selling point there. But you can mix and match. So you can actually have, in this scenario right here that we're showing you on the screen, is you could have 80% native user interface with .NET MAUI controls, right? Optimized collection views, optimized images, native interop, things like that. And then just slices of Blazor. Or you can just be like all Blazor 100%. Or just, or mix and match. Say, hey, I want 80% Blazor, 20% .NET MAUI. It's your application. I think that's one thing that I really like to point out on this. Did I kind of cover some of the other things as in the chatters? We got Yum, we got Andy answered there. WPF is a thing that's happening. Component model. I think there we go. Yeah, that's my thing.
For people that are mentally trying to place this Blazor Hybrid relative to other technologies, like React Native, because you're actually writing native UI with React Native in a cross-platform way, React Native is actually more analogous to MAUI itself. Yeah. Like what MAUI is doing with XAML, React Native is trying to do with JavaScript and a markup that looks very HTML-like, but is actually being mapped to native UI controls. So React Native and MAUI are kind of very similar, although React Native is got a veneer on it that's supposed to appeal more to a web developer crowd because it's JavaScript based, and so mostly web developers are going to know JavaScript. Blazor hybrid apps are more like other hybrid app frameworks like Electron, which is desktop specific, but still very similar pattern. If you're looking in the mobile space, you might look at something more like Cordova or Ionic. These are frameworks that are, again, JavaScript based, but they're rendering to a web view control, much like Blazor hybrid apps. Let's take a look. Let's see what this thing looks like. All right. So to try out Blazor Hybrid, what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to get .NET MAUI. So you want to go get the latest Visual Studio Preview, which has the .NET MAUI included in it. So you just install the mobile workload with the Visual Studio Preview, and then you'll be all set up. And I'm going to go ahead and create a new .NET MAUI Blazor app. So I'm going to go into VS, and I'm going to select the MAUI templates, and that's the one we want right there, .NET MAUI Blazor app. It's just a .NET MAUI app. Like you can see, there's a .NET MAUI template as well, which will be just pure XAML. In the .NET MAUI Blazor app case, we still have XAML, but we're specifically going to use Blazor with that MAUI application. Okay, so I'm going to pick this one, and MAUI App 1 sounds like a lovely name for my first .NET MAUI Blazor application. Okay, so here's our project, and it's a single project, but this project allows me to target Windows, Android, And then with Apple devices, you can target iOS and also macOS as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to fire this up for Android first. It takes about a minute or so for it to actually deploy to the emulator. But while it's doing that, let's go take a look at what this project actually has. So in mainpage.xaml, this is the main UI for this application. And this is XAML markup. So these are native UI controls that MAUI is going to map to the corresponding UI controls for the platform. On Windows, it's going to use WinUI 3. On Android, it's going to use Android widgets. On iOS, it'll use the iOS widgets and so forth. And you'll see that this app is really only using one MAUI control inside this content page, which is a Blazor WebView control. This is basically a wrapper around the platform-specific WebView control. So on Windows, we use WebView 2. On Android, we use the Android corresponding WebView control. I forget the exact ones on the other platforms. But it's going to render to a native WebView control, and it's going to render Blazor components to that thing. It'll do it through a local interop channel. So your component will run natively on the device. We're not using WebAssembly here to run your components. It's going to run it right on that normal .NET runtime. But then we render the DOM updates and handle the UI updates through a little local interop channel with that WebView control. So it's kind of like Blazor Server, but done all locally in a single process, on a single device. Okay. So
yeah, I think it. And Alon, I know you get a lot of questions on this too. But Dave was asking in the chat about like with the WebView control. I think Dan kind of answered the underlying browser control. But are there any limitations there on CSS, JavaScript, anything like that?
Yeah, I'd love to answer that. There is actually a serious limitation, which is the limitation of your own imagination. But yeah, the code of your app is the same code in any native app. Doesn't matter what you're rendering, native controls or web controls, or if you imagine some kind of newfangled 3D framework or something like that. The UI of your code is running in that whatever the native process is, just like launch any app on your phone or tablet or PC, your code can do whatever that code can do. Now, if you actually have some code running inside the web view, for example, you're using a charting component that is built using JavaScript, then there are whatever the normal limitations are of the browser. That chart control can't start reading files from disk because that'll get blocked. But that's not a limitation of your application. That's just a limitation of how a particular control was built. So your app, as far as the app is concerned, has no limitations, but the content that's inside, any code that's running inside the web view, which is not generally your app, it's just the controls, some of the controls themselves that are running there, like a chart control or some kind of video player or something like that might have some limitations, which you can usually work around that by implementing some code in your app and just using communication between that web view, which is, there's Blazor ways of doing that. You can communicate between the web view code and the rest of your app. And so you can kind of punch out of any limitation that might exist if you want to access something that's available on the device. Like if you want to use Apple's Face ID or something like that, if you wanted to punch out and integrate with that, you could absolutely do that. Just use JavaScript interop, which is a Blazor feature that's been around for ages. And you can, from the JavaScript code inside the web browser, punch out to the rest of your app code and call whatever native API. Because with .NET MAUI and its predecessor XAML Forms, you can use pinvoke, which is platform invoke, and call any native API that you want. So if you're running on Android and you need to call something like Java API, you can just call that Java API from C# code. There's ways of doing that.
So JavaScript interop in Blazor is kind of like the pinvoke for calling into the native APIs of the web platform.
Yep.
Whereas in a MAUI app, you can just use normal native interop patterns from .NET to talk to, Android or talk to Windows underneath you.
Yep. I think Dan hit debug. I think you ran into like a weird bug. So.
I think.
Oh no, it did run. Never mind.
No, we're good.
I lied. I was like, it's not doing anything, Dan. What's going on?
For those who haven't doubted, this is a full Blazor application. It's running in a WebView control in a native Android app on my emulator device right here. Just to show you, I didn't get a chance to finish going through how that all works. So for my Blazor WebView control, you need to specify what you want the root components of your app to be. In this case, I only have one, which is this main component. Where's that coming from? Well, there's a main.razor file defined over here in my MAUI project, and that gets compiled by the Razor compiler into a type called main. If we look at what that's got, And if you're familiar with Blazor, then you probably have seen this code before. This is the code that sets up the Blazor router so that you can route to different pages in your app based off of page navigations. Where are all those pages? Well, they're sitting in the pages directory, just like they would be in a normal Blazor web application. So we've got index.razor, counter.razor, and this code is literally the same code that you would see in a web application. Modulo, I think the where we get the weather forecast data from. Here it's just like generating it in memory. In some apps, we would actually do an API call. Since we wanted this to just be a single project, we didn't give you the server piece yet. But you could pair this MAUI app with an ASP.NET Core backend, and then here you would inject an HTTP client and make API calls to fetch, weather forecast data or whatever data you want from a ASP.NET Core server component.
Yep.
All right. So that's how this is all working, and that's what we're seeing here on Android.
I've got a rude question to jump in with.
Yeah.
Because, okay, so this looks like your app running there looks like a web app, right? Which it's because I'm used to seeing that design. What is kind of the standard, like would I use something like Fast or Blazorize or something like that with material design? Like I don't mind web design, but if somebody wants to make something looking really native, what do they do?
Yeah, so how you style this app is up to you. And so you get to choose which CSS framework you want to use. If you want to pick a CSS framework that tries to mimic the look and feel of the underlying device, you could do something like that. I don't know any frameworks off the top of my head that do that, but I do know they exist. Alternatively, you could go for the sort of, I want one set of styling that is consistent across all devices, and you can pick whatever you want. I mean, Bootstrap and the other popular CSS frameworks are designed to work and give you at least good paradigms on a mobile device. How you want to fiddle with those to make them fit to feel more native is up to you. We actually had a debate about this recently, whether we should change the content of the .NET MAUI Blazor template in any ways to make it feel a little bit more native app-like. Like, should we get rid of the Bootstrap stuff and put something else in? Should we change how the content looks? At least for this initial MAUI release, we're sticking with the just vanilla purple gradient Blazor look and feel, just so people understand what's going on there, that it's literally the same components. Like, there's nothing different going on. It'll be interesting to have a conversation with the community about what they would really want there. Like, what is the best starting point when you know that you're trying to build a native client app? Do people, are there other CSS patterns that they would prefer? Those are things that we'd love to get feedback on.
Yeah, and I wrote a multi-page document that was on templates, so that many moons ago, and it was a big debate. But no, I think it's a good point, right? In surveys that we've done with the developer community inside of .NET and outside of .NET is it's a mixed bag of what people want their apps to look like, right? Some people want it to 100% look material and Cupertino and fluent. Some people want their apps to look exactly the same 100%. I think the nice part is, like, you might want to use some native bits and pieces. Like, for example, here, Dan, right? You have a little hamburger button in the wrong place in the top right. We call that a hamburger button. That's weird, it's fine, like, people, there's all sorts of, use apps on your phone. They're all weird and different because designers design different things and they want their apps to be unique. So it's kind of up to you, but like, I may not want that, as a good experience. I might want tabs or something like that. And I might want native tabs, or I might want to replicate native tabs to be consistent, right? And I might use all CSS and HTML to do that on the different platforms. So it's really up to you there. But imagine you're a Blazor developer and you're like, I don't know anything about this Xamaly thing or whatever. This is a pretty comfortable world. And if you hit the home button, Dan, like, the important part here is when you swipe up here, like, the app is there, right? It's a real app on the device that Dan put in there. So it has access to all the permissions, all the flexibility, install, uninstall, and you can deliver that up to the App Store. And Prem was asking in the chat too, but about on Windows, it uses WebKit, right? It uses the native web views that are there, just like the other platforms do. So there's no issues. In fact, there's plenty of customers and developers that are actually deploying .NET MAUI Blazor apps, even though it's not GA yet, into the App Store today. So it's totally happening already. So they're there.
Let's get Windows up and running. We haven't seen Windows run yet. So this will be a WinApp SDK based application using WinUI 3 for the rendering, and it is embedding a WebView 2 based browser control.
Boom.
But these are the same. It's the same project, same code, just being rendered on 2 different platforms. I'm not set up with Mac and iOS, but you can do take this exact same project and run it on Mac and iOS as well. You can simulate from Visual Studio into iOS, and then on Mac, I think you actually need a Mac device in order to run for Mac OS.
Dan, I actually have it set up. I don't have this exact project up and running, but I do have a different app here. And the main thing that I wanted to highlight here is you can also integrate with MAUI Essentials. So using this, you can use native controls like a file picker. And this is all platform specific stuff. So on iOS, you get this photo picker. On Android, you would go into a separate file picker screen that you may be familiar with, and so on. So say if I select this image, I can have it added, and this now goes back into the Blazor context. I'm able to read the image metadata, show off the image itself, do all the navigations, counter arguments, and that kind of stuff as well. So it's that's the other option you have.
So that UI, like the green part, the headings, that's all Blazor. That's all HTML, right? But when you click the button, that was then native MAUI. Well, I guess native. This is iOS, right? So iOS file picker. That was then being fired up, and you called into that using MAUI Essentials. Yeah, I was going to show another MAUI Essentials situation as well, but that's a great one. Yeah, so it can do Apple as well. Same project, works on all four platforms, and any future platforms that we then take MAUI to as well. So let's take a look at that on the Windows device. So what I'm going to do is add some native UI to this application, and I'm not a great native dev, so that's why I've got James here to help me out and make sure I do that right. What I think we want to try to do is take this, instead of having this web-based tabbing, we're going to try and do native tabbing in this application. So is that right, James?
Yeah, there's many ways of doing this, but the nice part about .NET MAUI is it has a bunch of built-in page types, right? So can you make that font a little bit bigger for me, Dan? Maybe 160. That's perfect. Okay, so here's what's going on. We have this Blazor web view control, and it is just sitting there by itself being happy. And it's like, I'm going to be the entire app. It's inside this content page. And there's different types of pages inside of .NET MAUI. And there's a flyout page, which has like flyout hamburger button natively on each one. There's a carousel page, and then there's a tabbed page. And that has tabs on the top or on the bottom for the native platform. So let's turn this into a tabbed page over here. Cool. It's just built right in. Now, that's not built into Blazor, right? That's built into .NET MAUI. And we do need to change the code behind. So there's a XAML thing here. So let's change that. See, it's subclassing content page. Let's make that tab page perfect. Okay, so now we're doing this in XAML. And someone asked in the chat about MVU as well. And there is an experiment, Manish, called Comet that has an MVU style model view update. But if you're doing this, you're not really using any MVVM. You're using Blazor stuff, which we showed earlier. So, okay. So tabbed pages, Dan, have pages inside of them. So let's wrap that in a content page.
Content page. I remember this.
And then shove all of that in there. Okay. So all we did is we said, hey, if you ran this, you'd see nothing different because it's a tabbed page with one. But let's create multiple. So copy, paste that 2 more times. Okay. So we got 3 pages. We're just jamming pages in here, right? This is not how you would totally do it at all, but probably. And each of those pages have one thing in there. So let's
this will basically be the same app on every page right now.
That's bad. But you have pages, right? So let's make each of those pages instead of local main. So let's add another namespace to expose.
Okay. Add the XML and
XML namespace, in there. So this is important. So this is going to be different if you're coming from the Blazory world. There. So we're adding a namespace, kind of like your imports at the top.
This is the XML syntax for doing a using directive in XAML.
Exactly. Yeah. And again, you could have written all this in C# and stuff, but I'm a XAML person there. Okay. So let's get rid of those local mains and let's now get access to that thing. There.
Index. We'll do all 3 pages here, right? Page, counter, and then
IntelliSense shows up, all that stuff.
Yeah, not bad. And then what was it? Fetch data is the one I wanted. Can I just do? Can I see that? Oh, there, perfect.
Yeah, and then just debug that thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
On Windows?
Yeah, debug it though.
Oh, sorry.
Dan comes from a web world where just everything is there. So, but if you debug it, then you're going to get in XAML hot reload.
Okay,
which is cool. So let's do that.
We'll do the good thing.
Yep. Cool. So let's do this puppy here. And then
There it is.
All right, cool. Now, do you see that blue bar?
Yeah.
That's because they're hidden tabs. So there's no name on it yet. So if you try to click around next to it a little bit, next to the little blue thing.
I'm clicking.
Maybe
I think
to the right,
I don't have any
maybe
hit targets because I don't have any text. Maybe.
Oh, perfect. So let's put some text in there. That'd be good. So
let's put this like this, maybe.
Yep.
Room. Okay. So what is that? Like a title?
Yeah, it's gonna be a title on each of the content pages. So let's add that in there.
Home.
See it updated? See that over there? Bam.
Whoa.
Yep.
Well, hold on. Let's focus on that.
It updated.
Okay, the title.
Hey.
Counter.
Sorry, it just seemed
They're
cool.
showing up. Title.
I look away for 1 second. What's going on here?
Did it work? Oh, they work.
Yeah, hey, there you go.
Yeah. So each of those is a separate Blazor web view in a native tabbed page.
Yeah. Now there's a few things that you can do here, right? So you could add some. So like, if you were to put this, if you were to put that thing into you want to add the padding to the content page. There you go. On the first one. So go to the.
I have to restart for that.
No, see the first one there, Dan. You added it.
Did I mess something up?
Yeah, you put it on the Blazor web view.
Oh my goodness!
Yeah. See the little squiggle? It's trying to help you.
Trust the tool. Trust the tool.
So a few things there is like Dan just shoved that page in there directly, right? So now you got 3 Blazor web views with 3 different pages there and you can navigate to and from, right, as well. So now we have this there, which is cool.
So that UI at the top then is native, and then the web views are the Blazor.
Exactly. Now you probably want to set on the content page background colors of white as well, so you kind of match that as well.
That purple border.
Yeah.
There we go.
Oh, there it goes. Okay. Perfect. Yeah. Nice.
And this should work on Android as well.
Yep.
Let's try that. I want to do Android, and I don't need to debug this one, right? I can just stay with my web development habits.
Live your life, I say. Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with debugging in your web developer, by the way. So I don't want to make
well, when you debug, it's also going to take a little bit longer, too. So, but look at that.
True. That's why I usually run Control F5 instead of F5 just because it starts up a little faster. But
it does.
It is nice having the debugger there all the time.
Well, and you saw, how fast it started, like in milliseconds. The team's really focused on that. But notice though, you get these material tabs on top compared to the Windows app, which had a Fluent design for your Windows 11 machine, which was quite nice over there. Now, there are options like on iOS. If you ran this app, you get tabs on the bottom. And on Android, you can also put these tabs on the bottom too, because NET MAUI gives you that flexibility. That's the native Chrome. You have native, stuff basically inside of there that's happening. So
I think that brings up a really good thing here. So Andy says, hey, you could have done the tabs in Blazor, but
totally.
A key thing you're pointing out, I mean, you could do that, but it's nice to have the native controls here, right? Because that'll work better, say, with accessibility controls on the machine or whatever, right?
If you want native UI, like if there's a native component or control in the ecosystem for Android or Windows that you want to use, you can do that. That's the idea here. You can have a mix of web UI and native UI if you want that.
Totally. I also love that Alon is getting blocked by Nightbot. I need to make him an admin on YouTube. No, that's a great point. And again, I said this at the beginning and I'll say it again. Every app is different, right? Like you might want it to be 100% that web user interface, right? Or you might want this native integration because like John was talking about, you might have that like native capabilities over there of like accessibility that you may want to put in there. I'm going to add Alon as a moderator. You have to repost everything because everything got blocked. Alon, there you go. Please feel free to.
What were you posting?
Maybe I'm just a bot.
No, you're good. No, I can't I can't restore yours, so you're gonna have to repost everything.
No, I did. I posted. I just put. It thinks that posting. It's not Maui friendly. I posted the text platforms/android/star.cs,
Yeah.
and I think it thought that was a URL, which is most certainly
bunch
not.
of stuff.
How could you? How could you?
It's trying
Let's add some native functionality, right? Like we can use native UI, and that is native functionality. But what else can I do with this native device that maybe I couldn't otherwise do with the web?
Yeah, that's a great point. Actually, if you zoom in over on the Solution Explorer over there, one thing, there's this Platforms folder. If you expand that,
okay,
and then expand.
Be careful, Nightbot will think you're showing a URL and will block it.
Yeah, like now zoom in on this puppy. So one thing I really want to point out is like how .NET MAUI is structured is like inside of these platform files and folders, you have access to native capabilities. You have access to them outside with conditional compilation, actually, with the if pound Android. But you can actually just jam code inside of here. You can use the built-in dependency injection and constructor injection that you know and love from ASP.NET Core. We can show that off. We should show that it's the same. It's using that same host, model, but you can access Android Bluetooth. You can access all this other stuff. But there's actually a bunch of stuff built into .NET MAUI called Essentials that abstracts like 70 plus different native APIs. And Tanay was showing that earlier, right? He was showing that you can use a file picker and it'll do the right things based on the platform that you're on there. But look at this. Look at how cool this is.
This is the hosting stuff that you were talking about, right? Like, so this is the root of my MAUI program in some sense. And here I'm using this MAUI app builder abstraction, and it's kind of looks. I'm familiar with ASP.NET Core. There's a lot of stuff here that feels familiar. I've got this builder pattern, and then I can register DI services using the same iService collection abstraction that we have in ASP.NET Core.
Yep. Yeah, and that's, for example, Dave was asking like native capabilities. You might, for example, have an interface or a class that's a barcode scanner. You're tapping into native capabilities, or you just use a community library that's out there already. Because there's, that's the nice thing is Xamarin's been around for decade plus, right? So we're good to go. So let's show off like connectivity, for example. So Dan and I rehearsed this, so he's ahead of me.
I'm going for it. So we're gonna use MAUI Essentials. Like, I don't have to add anything to my MAUI app to get MAUI Essentials, right? It's built in,
pre-configured, built into the box.
We're gonna try and check whether or not the internet is still around, still available on my on my app. Okay, so I've got this check internet method, and what I do is I create a button.
Yep.
And when I click the button, this is all Blazor code, so I know this part.
Yep.
This is the when I click on my HTML button, then I want to call this .NET method, and in here we're gonna see if the device has a network available. How do we do that?
So let's just create a new variable, and then just let's do the long form, Microsoft.maui.essentials.
Essentials.
And then check that out, right? So these are all of the built-in APIs. There's like accelerometer, there's app actions, there's connectivity, there's gyros, you just scroll through that. There's app theming, there's connectivity, there's file pickers, there's all the things. There's interfaces in there for everything. There's web authenticator.
Someone was asking about Auth, right? Like they wanted to know, like, can I do like a generic OIDC flow from my MAUI app and have that work on all platforms? Like, this abstraction gives you the sort of the right way, which web view to use when having the user type in their login credentials with an OpenID Connect Auth flow.
Now, some of those APIs are like built into the web browsers, right? Like through JavaScript APIs, those exist, but these are going to be calling the native APIs on the platform, which is really important. So let's do connectivity on here, dot. And then you have access to the profiles and the network access. So let's do network access. And let's see if it equals network access dot internet. And if that means it has internet, also it'll be none or limit or something like that. This is like full internet. Let's also do the profiles. So that means like Wi-Fi, if it's on Ethernet, whatever.
Right?
Yep. So and let's do, first or default. We'll just pull the first one there. And then, if it doesn't exist, let's do unknown, for example.
Is it this one? No. Okay.
Yeah. And then maybe put a question mark after the connection profiles just in case something is null there. There we go. Perfect.
Yep.
Perfect.
So now what we want to do is we want to like do a little pop-up here, right? So you could use like the alert mechanism inside of JavaScript. That would be bad. Don't do that. So let's use, you're on a native platform. Let's do a native thing. So let's display an alert dialog natively. And this will look different on Android, Mac, and Windows because it'll be native. So we're going to get access to the app.current.
Current app.
Dot main page.
Main page.
Yep. So what we're kind of doing here, and this is not how you would do it in the real world because we're demoing here, is what we would do is we would actually probably use some sort of interface, get access to a thing, make sure it's not null, but we're doing it here. Yeah. People would, interfaces are good, and you would inject it in and do this stuff. So yeah, so there we go. We have a message, we have status. Then you can just use some string interpolation. There you go.
Internet. Yeah, okay. And type of internet.
Now this is going to pull the first one, right? So they come in random order, so you maybe don't know 100%. What's in there?
Was it cancel or something? I can't remember the.
Yeah, probably just okay.
But all three of those parameters are doing, I think.
Yep.
And
yes, got a line. Yeah, move line 27.
I'm trying.
There you go.
Good.
Now you should probably await on that.
Wait.
Yeah.
Oh wait. Now James showed me this earlier. I didn't know it, but if I type await, is it going to do the thing? Oh darn! What I didn't do. I guess I have to type. In this case, I have to type manually. Probably because I didn't type it from the beginning. That's
probably.
But Visual Studio has this new feature where like it will add the await for you if you like start typing it'll add async keyword if you start typing the await. To await an asynchronous API. It will update the wrapper method for you. First time I saw it was amazing.
So that is, that display alert's coming from .NET MAUI, right? And there's a bunch of different ones like input and pickers and sliders, but that'll give you the native UI, which is nice. And now you just run this. Just run it. Yeah.
Let's
run it on Android. Android is the easiest, so you don't have to disconnect from the internet. So you can disconnect from the internet, right?
If I just got from the internet with Windows, that might be problematic.
That might be problematic. All right. Well, that's booting up. Oh, it's already there.
I think it's still.
Oh, it's still going.
Is it done? Let me check. Oh yeah, it is here. Okay, here's my second button.
It's so fast, Dan.
It was so bad. I couldn't believe it. Okay, so I'm clicking the second button, and there it is. So yes, I have internet, and currently it says cellular. Okay, so now if I go and do the drag down from the top thing and turn on airplane mode and click on this again, has internet false, type unknown. And this will work cross-platform, right? So if I do try this on Windows, I won't disconnect from the internet.
Yeah, do a debug. Do a debug and add a breakpoint.
No, disconnect your Wi-Fi. I want to see.
Too late. I already hit the Wi-Fi. It's just habit. It's like.
I'm gonna get Dan into the debug.
Fine.
It's fine. You don't have to debug it, but it'll work.
And then here.
Yeah, but look at the style, right?
Yeah.
So that is a native. You're in dark mode. Is displaying a dark mode. Different. You go back to Android, right? And that's a different look and feel because that is the native Android dialogues. And here's the important part. I also want to pull this out too, is as iOS, Android, Mac, and Windows evolve, when you use native UI and native alerts and dialogues, your app organically and naturally updates with the operating system, right? And if you want that to happen, you use native controls. And that's one thing that Miguel and I, we used to go and present on stage, and we would take an app that was built with Xamarin a decade ago, recompile the app, and show it through the generations as Apple updated its UI. It's the same control, the same code, and it would update alongside. So you can get the native bits and pieces as it's going, and that's super important.
Cool. So we've seen native here. We see desktop and we see mobile. And the question is, well, presumably this can also do web, right? Because I'm doing Blazor, so I should be able to do web as well. So I wanted to show that real quick, that you can absolutely take the same UI and share it across your native clients, mobile and desktop, as well as web. Let me go ahead and shut this app down. I'm going to move over to a different project that I've already configured this way. it does take a little bit of just shuffling files around. So because a common scenario, I think, is I have a web application that I wrote with Blazor, and now I want to reuse that in a native client application. Maybe I just want to mostly shrink wrap it and then light up native features for that app when running on native. How can I do that? Well, the pattern is that you're going to want to move your Blazor components into a reusable Razor class library. Those components then can be used anywhere. They can be used in a Blazor Hybrid app, in a Blazor Server app, and in a Blazor WebAssembly app. And that's what I've done here. So I have these 3 applications up above, right? I have Blazor Hybrid, Blazor Server, Blazor WebAssembly, and those are just the default templates, except I've gutted them. I've removed, let me close that. I've removed all of the Blazor specific code in here, except for just the root index.html file, which sets up the corresponding hosting model scripts. That's the only piece that's really left in there. And then I have at the bottom this Razor class library, which has all of the actual Blazor code. So there's the, my pages and the layout stuff, and then all the web assets that I need, like Bootstrap, is all sitting in the www root folder. And here's my main root component. And all 3 of these applications, the Blazor Hybrid, Blazor Server, Blazor WebAssembly, are just depending on that Razor class library. So here you can see it there. I mean, it's for all 4 platforms, but that's just a quick place to see it. Blazor Server, same dependency. You get the idea. So if we run all these applications like Blazor Hybrid, let's set this as startup. So this will be the MAUI app version. I'm just going to run it on Windows. All right, and so that gives us, there's our Windows app using the set of components that's in our shared Razor class library. While we're at it, let's go ahead and do Android as well so that we can see that, yeah, this works on Android. So I'm going to get the same, oh, I didn't want to debug, but whatever. I think that's okay. Might be a problem when I try to do the other ones. And then we should be able to also do web.
Yeah, so this is a cool scenario. And then you can kind of pick and choose your deployment models, right? So with .NET MAUI, your native apps, your iOS, Android, and Windows, like those are all natively compiled, ahead of time compiled, optimized. You have very fine-grained control over them. Then your web app, right, with Blazor, someone was asking about AOT, you can decide, is it server, is it WebAssembly, is it AOT or not, right? You can mix and match those capabilities based on your app, right? This web app is whatever your web app is. Like that's one of the goals here at the end of the day.
Yep. And because I hit debug, that took a little bit longer, but and I think it just died. This one here. There it goes. Okay, so there's the mobile, and then let's do web. I'll just do Blazor Server in the interest of time. And that's popping up over here on my browser. So we've got now the same application, Blazor all the things, mobile, desktop, and web. So it does take a few minutes just to like move the files around, but that's the pattern that enables you to reuse your web UI logic everywhere. And you can take this to build real applications. We did this for the recent .NET Conf conference end of last year, where we built an entire like podcast listening application using Blazor Hybrid, .NET MAUI Blazor application, but also for web. And that allowed you to have the same podcast app on mobile, desktop, and web. Do you have that, James? Do you want to show that real quick?
I do. It's a good question. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. I only have one screen, so it's going to do some craziness, but go ahead and switch off, and then let me know when I'm good.
Okay, I've added to your screen.
Cool. So this is the .NET podcast app. It's on the /Microsoft/.NET podcast, and we've been updating this as .NET MAUI and Blazor and stuff like kind of continue to update as well. And this is pretty cool because it's a really beautiful web app, mobile app, desktop app. We're going to continue to update it as everything progresses, and has this really great architecture and things like this. And you can deploy it locally with Docker, or you can deploy it from GitHub Actions and create your own app. But let's look at the Blazor app. So this is actually an ASP.NET Core Razor landing page. It's very beautiful. And it pulls in some recent podcasts in here, and it's really, really nice. If I hit sign in, that's going to go to the Blazor app. Now, this is a Blazor WebAssembly app, and a lot of people don't know, but you can mix and match these technologies, right? So when you go to the .NET Live TV page, this is all Blazor WebAssembly with the countdown, the live now, all this other stuff. But the rest of the website is just ASP.NET Core, right? So there's this mixing and matching of technology that you can do. It doesn't have to be one or all. But this is all Blazor. So I can go in here. I can take a look at the podcast. There's the .NET MAUI podcast, for example. This pulls down stuff. We just talked about Preview 13. I have subscriptions set up here. Oh, there's my podcast merge conflict. Everyone should go do that. I can do listen later. So I've bookmarked some stuff, and I have, light mode and dark mode and all this stuff. And it's nice. It's beautiful, right? Now, if we look at this code, this is actually the .NET MAUI Blazor app. Okay, so the hybrid app. So what's cool about this is that these components and this shared code over here are all shared with the web app. So we have data events and we have pages. So here's all Razor categories, discover, like all just Blazor-y stuff, right? Blazor Razor all day, blah, 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 blah. Same thing here. We have all these shared components, like a shared player, a listen together mode, extensions, all this stuff here. And then what the team did is they came in and they said, hey, let's literally, take this main layout and look at this index, and it just navigates to the discover page. So it's that Blazor in here with .NET MAUI. So it just pulls in that same exact thing that Dan showed you earlier, right? So it's 100% reuse of this web app that was created right over here. So 100% right here. And that's going to run on all the different platforms. So in this instance here, if I pull this up, we have our Windows application. And over here, I have my Android application. It looks really nice. I can go in, I can tap around. This is going to call in the back end. I can subscribe. I can look at my subscriptions, right? I get all the same exact 100% view, right? And all coming in here 100%, which is really cool.
It's really cool how you can also get the storage space and stuff like that. So I'm assuming that's for downloading the podcast and so on.
Yeah, so that's actually a neat part too, is that you're not restricted, right? So even though this is using like 99%, 100% Blazor, there is actually, that's a good point. There is actually some native code in here under platform Windows. Or where do we put it? You know who wrote this code? He just left. Alon left, and he was in here. There was some local storage interop. That's what it was, and not that one. It's somewhere in here basically, and it accesses native Windows capabilities to show off pulling in like this storage space. So actually, funnily enough, if I just like pull up my PC, you can actually see it's red, right? It's actually the same amount. So it's actually calling that there. It's always red all the time. So the other thing though that's really neat is that we have this cool mode, and I'm going to pull this up over here. It's called Listen Together. So for example, if I go over here, I can listen to this podcast, but I can also do Listen Together. I'm going to say this is Blazor because I'm on Blazor Web. I'm going to open this room. And it gives me this code, the QIPYP. And this allows me to like listen together with friends. So if I come over to this listen together, this is going to use Signal R. I'm going to join this room. I'll say Blazor Windows, join room. Cool. And you can see I have multiple people in here. I can now like start, and I'm listening to the podcast multiple times. You see it go here. I can go over to Android, and I'm going to go ahead and paste this in here and also join the room. And I'm going to say Blazor Android. Okay. And I'm going to join the room too. And now we get another one. Dan's joined the room. We're all listening. We can send these emojis back and forth, right? And Dan from the other side of the world can start playing the podcast.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
And now they all update to be playing over here, which is really neat. And I can pause it. Then we pause it as well. Now, here's the other thing too, is that while we're 100% Blazor over here, I actually have a whole nother version of the app that is actually native UI, except for one of the pages. So look at how this is actually different in a collection view over here and not scrolling left and right. But if I go to listen together, this is actually Blazor. So this is showing you .NET MAUI and Blazor together. I'm going to join this room, and I join over here. So this is actually a hybrid app using native UI plus Blazor for this one page over here too, right? And if I start playing it here, it plays over here, but uses native interop to play natively on the device. So, okay, we can stop. Okay, I'm going to stop it. Okay, we're good. Signal. Okay, geez, I'm going to stop this now. Okay, so
we can't hear it though. Like you're probably getting inundated with like 4 different.
So let me. So what I'll show you here, right, is that there's a web app, right? So you have all the stuff over here. You have this mobile Blazor, which is going to be exactly what I just showed you, which is the .NET MAUI Blazor Hybrid app. But then you also have this just mobile. This is just .NET MAUI, right? So 100% over here. And if I go into views, we have XAML views. If I go into pages, all native XAML, native UI controls. But over here in this listen together page, look at this Blazor web view, right? So we are actually being able to mix and match. So this is a good example. We wanted to show both use cases of being able to not only do 100% Blazor and integrate a few bits of native capabilities, but also that flexibility over there too. So that's that nice part of this podcast application as we continue to build it out.
As much Blazor as you want, right? You can have all Blazor, you can have just a little bit of Blazor, you have that flexibility.
Exactly. So let's go ahead and hide my screen, and then we answer maybe some questions. How's that sound?
Awesome. Yeah, that was a really interesting demo, and it's really, let me just, 1 second.
I do have one more thing to show. Can I show one more thing?
Oh my goodness.
It's quick.
It's I don't know that. Can you?
Not
one more.
Okay, so
I'm kidding. Show as much as you want. This is awesome.
We've been doing what is it? Where were we at? We're doing MAUI and showing cross-platform, the latest, greatest UI stack. But sometimes, like this is what we've been doing, right? We've been doing web, desktop, mobile, all with Blazor through .NET MAUI. But sometimes you have an app that kind of looks like this, right? Like sometimes you have a wonderful piece of code that's serving a great business function, but you want to be able to modernize. This Blazor Hybrid pattern also gives you that opportunity too. Because remember, Blazor Hybrid works wherever you can run .NET code. As long as you have a web view control and a place to run .NET, you can run Blazor components. And so the idea here is you could use Blazor as a way to modernize existing like legacy desktop applications to give your app a new fresh coat of paint, if you will. So in addition to supporting Blazor Hybrid with .NET MAUI, we're also shipping Blazor web view controls for WPF, like if you have existing WPF apps that you want to modernize, and also Windows Forms, if you have existing Windows Forms apps that you want to do that with too. And I'll just show you that really, really quick. I have a couple of app samples that show this. So here is a Blazor Hybrid WPF application. This is WPF. So we're going to see some XAML here, but this is not MAUI XAML. This is a WPF XAML. But look at the bottom there. There's the Blazor web view control. This is the WPF version of that control. We got the WPF XAML designer up above. We can go ahead and run this, and we should see a WPF desktop app. There it is. So there's our Blazor components running in WPF. We can also do, of course, Windows Forms as well. So here's another project. This is a WinForms application. So we got, form1.cs. Here's the WinForms designer. Once this loads up, we see that we again have a single web view control. If we go look at what that actually is, I think I have to click F7 to see the code behind. This web view 1, that's a Blazor web view. That's what we've got in our WinForms application as well. We can run this, and we should get a WinForms app that's hosting Blazor. So you have a modernization option here as well. If you're not on MAUI yet, you can still use Blazor if you have some desktop apps that you want to use it with too. So yeah, that's what I want to show. In terms of timeframes for when is all this stuff going to be actually stable and ready for production use? We just shipped .NET 6. .NET MAUI is scheduled to ship at the end end of Q2, somewhere in Q2 2022. So in the next couple of months. And then that's when the WPF and WinForms Blazor WebView controls will ship as well. So you'll get all three. And then MAUI and all that work will then move into the .NET 7 release train, which will ship in November of this year, later this year.
So all including what about the WPF and WinForms that ships at the same time?
Those will get the WPF and WinForms controls will ship with .NET MAUI, so you'll get a stable version of those controls for .NET 6 in Q2 of this year in the next couple of months. Yep. And then they will ship with the .NET 7 release train in November as well. They'll be all part of the same wave.
Does that work with the other question I have? I'm asking now random questions. Is for the WPF and WinForms, is that only on running .NET 6 or can it be in framework apps as well?
We're only supporting it at .NET 6. So you do need to be on the .NET Core based .NET based versions of WPF and WinForms. Yeah. So that is one modernization step that you would have to take first. Now, conceptually, could you make it work in .NET Framework, WPF and WinForms? It's .NET, so probably. We just haven't committed to do that work. So right now we require .NET 6.
Got it.
Makes sense. Cool. We have a few questions in the chat. Let's go through a couple of them, if that's okay. This person here is asking, can you use third-party Blazor components with this? So Syncfusion, Telric, MudBlazor, Blazorize, all those kinds of libraries.
Absolutely. Any Blazor WebView, any Blazor Web UI component, you can use in a Blazor Hybrid app.
Yep.
Just
awesome.
pop it in, just like you would any other component.
Just Blazor and in .NET MAUI. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's, in fact, Alon has a demo where he like pulled down some third-party open control, things like that, and just works just fine. Yep.
Okay, awesome. The other question here is, can we set elements based on the OS? So I think you'd shown this off in the podcast app, sort of, with the local storage.
Yeah, great question. So that's a great point. So when you're doing the .NET MAUI Blazor Hybrid application model, inside of the Essentials API, you can detect and say, am I running on iOS? Am I running on Android? You can also conditionally compile it too. But if you want your code to have if on this platform do this, if on this platform do this, you can do that. Or additionally, you might have an interface, for example. You could do that. And I think on the elements, you'd be able to do that too, right? So for example, inside of your Razor code, you would have an if statement and say, if on this platform show this UI, else show this other UI there. And if you're in XAML, you can also do that too. So there's pretty much very similar APIs to do that. There's something called on platform on XAML that would do that, but it'd be very similar on there. And I think, we're at the very early points of this. So I believe that there'll be lots of learning that we do along the way. And I assume tons of great libraries from the community that will help, right? Imagine having little extensions that are, showing and hiding things there. But I do think that the if statements are the best because then it doesn't get put into the DOM, right? Because it won't add it. Basically, if you added a bunch of them, just hid them on different platforms, they would still be in the DOM, I guess, at some point. Yeah, I don't know how the DOM work.
In the Razor syntax of your Blazor components, you can absolutely do runtime checks, like you were talking about, like having C# code that says, like, if I'm running on Windows, then render this stuff. If I'm running on Android, do this other thing. If you're in C# code, you can also do the conditional stuff where you say, if I'm building for Windows, then only include this stuff on Windows or only include this stuff in Android. In Razor syntax itself, we don't really have great support yet for doing that conditional compilation in the Razor syntax. It's a gap. It's something that we'll probably look at post the first release of MAUI. If that ends up being a really tough pain point for you, please let us know, because that'll help us know how high to prioritize that work in the Razor compiler itself. With the current implementation, you'll basically want to structure your rendering logic around some runtime checks in order to light up different UI. Yeah. Everything else you can do with conditional compilation if you want.
Yep. Okay, cool. Question here. Hot reload doesn't work for MAUI apps. Is it supported? What the stage of that
is?
It
will. So hot reload, from what I actually understand, I think hot reload, the changes are being applied to .NET MAUI apps even today.
Yep.
The part that's not currently working with .NET MAUI Blazor apps is that we need a signal from the runtime to tell us like, hey, I just applied a change. Please re-render the Blazor component so that you can see the result. That hook hasn't been wired up yet for .NET MAUI. It is being done like right now. So within either this coming preview or the next one, hot reload should start working for .NET MAUI Blazor applications. If you're doing it with like WPF and WinForms, I think it works already because those already have that wire up in the application.
And I think that also when you're doing it, you'll see a mix match, right? So when you debug your application, you'll get XAML hot reload, right? So there's multiple flavors of hot reload, right? It's all in one bundle. There's like a whole matrix of shenanigans that you need to try to parse. But XAML hot reload will work. So when Dan was setting the titles and the colors, it would update there. There's still some quirks there here and there as it's still not in GA, right? But also the code changes in the code behind will change too. So even inside the Razor file, if you were to apply a code change, that will actually work. In most instances, right? Again, it's just not finalized, so it'll be there. But there are many instances where it works today because .NET MAUI supports C# and XAML hot reload already. But yeah, good question. And ideally, everything smooths out over time.
Okay, cool. Next question here. How would cookies work? So working with cookies in an embedded context.
You eat them? They're delicious. Chocolate chips.
I don't know. If they're low carb keto cookies, then I can eat them. But if not, then I can't. No, they work the same overall. However, if you're on the native platforms, the recommendation is to not use them where possible. In .NET MAUI Essentials, there's shared preferences. There's a preferences API. And what this enables you to do is set different variable types like booleans, integers, floats, doubles, date times, GUIDs, things like that, strings, obviously. And that's really nice, like a settings screen, right? Where you're going to use that there. So you're going to save that, or like global states. I think maybe that's what they're talking about too. You also have secure storage. So that's another part. So like preferences are just in isolated storage where secure settings are inside of like the keychain, for example. Which are really nice. So you'd want to use those. And the nice thing there is that those are going to survive. Those are actually going to survive app updates, app reboots. They also, you can configure them to back up to cloud storage and things like that as well, like iCloud.
To go back to cookies just real quick, though, I want to make sure we're clear on that. Like with Blazor and a Blazor hybrid setup, you have a browser, right? You have a web view control, and it can do cookies.
Yep.
However, cookies are a like request response thing, right? And like you send a request to some server, the server sends you some cookie headers, and you store those in the browser. With Blazor hybrid, there's really no HTTP request response.
That's true.
The root HTML document that is being loaded in the browser control is part of the app. Like it's locally on the device. So there's no real like setting of cookies that's happening there. Now, if you decide to then have links in your Blazor hybrid app that point to external URIs and that cause the browser to navigate to those external sites, you can do that.
Yeah.
But you do need to be careful because now you're potentially downloading whatever code from the internet into that Blazor web view control, which has access, some level of access potential to the native device. So you got to be really, you don't, in general, the security guidance from my understanding is with these embedded web view controls, you don't want ever load untrusted code into those web view controls. So cookies aren't generally a thing. Often you may be asking about authentication. Like authentication often does involve a cookie to establish the user's identity. Often in those cases, you're going to either the system browser or you remember that web authentication broker API. It's like a special system browser that's used specifically for handling the authentication flow so that the app can then establish the user's identity. And usually with a native client app, once the identity is established, you're not dealing with cookies anymore. You've got the user's identity and you use it locally. Maybe you acquire a token that you then use to call APIs, but you're not generally then directing the browser control to external endpoints and sending cookies to them.
Yeah, that's
in fact, we generally recommend against doing that.
I was thinking about like Apple, like local app storage, not cookies. But yeah, no, that's a great point. In fact, when you are using that web authenticator, there are cookies involved there, like you're saying. And in fact, I would extremely discourage, anywhere that your app links to external resources because Apple will reject your app in many cases. They're very strict. Once you put your app, want to put it into an app store, you have to adhere to the app, guidelines there as well. So you want to be there. They're not always going to do that. I link to websites all the time, but like for privacy policies. But let's say you link to your site and you can buy something there. They don't like that. You know what I mean? So there's different things there to just, read the guidelines.
Okay.
What else do we got?
Cool. I did highlight this question. This was kind of related to what Dan was saying earlier, where if you have a Blazor web view, you don't necessarily want to be linking to external sources, because then, of course, there is a chance that you could get some sort of interaction there with the native WPF controls or native APIs and so on.
To answer this question from Prem, yes, that is what you're effectively doing. You're taking your Blazor components and hosting them in a WPF app, and then rendering them to a local web view control in that application. And that is going to be supported in the same time frame that we're shipping .NET MAUI in just a little bit here. You can try it out today. We don't have templates for WPF in WinForms like we do for MAUI, so you have to piece it together a little bit. There's a NuGet package you install into the project, and then that contains the WPF or WinForms Blazor Web View control that you then add to your app. So you have to do a little bit more manual setup, but we have tutorials now on the in the Blazor Hybrid docs in the ASP.NET Core doc set that you can reference on how to do that.
And I'll clarify Neil's question about the Apple stuff. It just depends on what the website and what the things are. You know what I mean? There's different policies for different app stores, all of them, Google, Windows, Apple in general, right? So it really just depends on it. Different apps, different requirements based on that. And sometimes, there's different like sign up things. There's a bunch of app store policies. I've been dealing with it for 10 years. I usually don't have any issues, but sometimes you do. So they're there. Do we have a time check? Do we need to drop off, John, for the
So we have a show starting in 4 minutes. We can basically run right up until, give them a minute or two before,
Okay.
but they usually start a
right
couple
on time?
minutes after.
We should maybe wrap it then, I guess.
Yeah.
Sounds good. Let's wrap it up in that case. That's basically it for the Blazor Hybrid Stand-Up for today. Thank you all so much for watching, and thank you, Dan, James, John, for presenting, and thanks, Elon.
Happy to be here.
All right.
Thanks
Yeah,
everyone for attending.
Yeah, feel free to reach out to Dan or me or Elon for any questions at all, and maybe we'll just do a Q&A. There's so many questions.
Yeah.
More.
Cool.
Sounds great.
All right.
Thanks all.